What you're about to watch is a conversation between me and another soldier on the topic of sexual assault and harassment. The content discussed in this video is graphic and is not appropriate for children. We're calling this video project Honest Conversations. It's a response to all the men and women who have taken to social media to share their own personal stories of pain and assault. We hope that this conversation brings hope and courage to the rest of you. You can't see my microphone, right? I tucked underneath. Okay, so I'm going to start recording the camera too.
All right, let us know.
All right, why don't you guys start rolling on your end too?
Rolling.
All right, Sergeant Forrester, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Yeah. Okay, so for those who are going to join us and have never met us before, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us where you are, who you are, and where you are in the world.
Okay, I am Staff Sgt. Jessica Forrester. I am a 46th Sierra Mass Communications Sergeant, and currently I am assigned to the 206th Broadcast Operations Detachment in Grand Prairie, Texas, just outside of Dallas, and my role there is as a training and operations NCO.
Yeah, and I should mention that I'm in Fort Bragg area, North Carolina, so we are many, many miles away, and this is the first time I've ever done something like this. I've interviewed people in different aspects, different places, but this is the first time I've ever done this through a computer and with cameras rolling on both sides. So I'm putting a lot of faith and trust in your crew to make sure that they get the video and audio right, but I know they will because we've worked with each other before. And so actually, if you don't mind, I want to start with talking about what this is. In a nutshell, I think that Honest Conversation is an attempt to tackle difficult topics and to be honest about it and to face them head on and be willing to be humbled by the challenges that we face in our military so that we act upon it and we enact change for the better. Hopefully that by you sharing your story, Sergeant Forrester, it empowers other women to share theirs as well, that your voices be heard, and additionally, that people like me who are usually not touched by these incidents, that we can just be more aware and be more thoughtful of how damaging this is in our military. So before we get into your story, Sergeant Forrester, why don't you tell us why you want to be here, why you want to be part of Honest Conversations and talk about your story.
People I've served with over the last 10 years come out and share their stories, how they've experienced sexual harassment or sexual assault throughout their career at the breaking of the Vanessa Gillen case. And it dawned on me that these are people that I've served with in outrageous capacities. Like some of them, maybe we just go to the range, with their unit once a year, or maybe I deployed with them, or maybe I knew them in high school and haven't talked to them since. But it was important for me to share my story at that same time to let the people that I've served with know, the NCOs that I know, that this isn't an issue that's happening somewhere else. It's not always happening in a unit far away or to someone you've never met, or it's not at some installation you've never been to before. It's happening in your own formations to your soldiers that you know, that you mentor, and the perpetrators are also soldiers in your formations who are exhibiting behaviors that go uncorrected because we blow it off as a seemingly innocent joke that's not going to go any further. And kind of realizing how all these pieces tie together is what prompted me to share my story. And I think that bringing attention to those things is going to empower all soldiers to, to live the Army values. It's going to empower people to make those on-the-spot corrections to not just to their peers, but also to put people in positions of power and authority if they're not falling in line with what is their responsibility to do as an NCO or as an officer.
There's a lot of difficult topics to address in the military, and I think that the fact of sexual harassment and sexual assault, we tend to believe that the line is so well drawn, it's so defined that we ought to be able to recognize when something's wrong every single time, right? I come from a position of ignorance because for many years in the Army, throughout my Army career, I thought and believed that we are part of a phenomenal institution. I love the Army. I love the fact what it represents. I love the commitment to service and sacrifice that our service members do and live through in order to be in our military. But I used to believe that this institution was untouchable, that we had these annual requirements every year of SHARP training, EO training, but that it was a problem out there, that it wasn't something that touched our lives, and only because I didn't see it. I didn't see it day to day. I didn't experience it as a guy, as a male. So we have to be honest about the fact that it's happening. Not that it happened, but it's happening. It's easy for us to point out there and not realize that statistically, according to CDC, 1 in 3 women have been victimized in some sort of sexual violence. 1 in 5 have been raped. And so you're one of them. Can you talk about some of those experiences or share what you want from your journey?
When I originally shared this, I guess very vaguely on my social media, reading other people's posts, easily 4 incidents came to mind for me. And the first incident, I was a trainee, and I was excited. I got to go out on pass, and some friends of mine and I decided we were just going to go camping. We were joined by some other other service members for this camping trip, and there was alcohol involved, and which we all know, if anybody is under the influence, there is no such thing as consent. And I guess I struggled to identify this as sexual assault or as rape for so long because I felt personally responsible for maintaining my own boundaries and being able to take care of myself. And it wasn't violent. It wasn't, I wasn't abused physically. Nobody beat me up, but I was unconscious. And by the time I realized what was going on, he was already finished. And I just rolled back over and went back to sleep. I didn't know how to process what had happened. And I felt like because I had let my guard down that I was to blame. And so I never reported it. I addressed it with that person head on, and I just told him, "You're I don't want to talk to you anymore." That wasn't okay. I completed my training shortly after, and I moved on with my life, and thought that it was all behind me, that it wouldn't bleed into other areas. The second incident, I was on a mission with a unit preparing to deploy, and we were in San Antonio. And if you're in San Antonio, you have to hit up the Riverwalk, and soldiers like to cut loose. So we finished up our duty day. We all went and hung out at the Riverwalk. It wasn't a big deal. And I was with a group of people that I felt safe around. We had dinner, we hung out, and we came back. But the people who were in my group, their rooms were on the floor below mine. And so I was left in an elevator at the end of the night with a soldier I didn't know, had only met very briefly. And when the doors closed and we headed up to our floor, he pinned me against the wall of the elevator and he felt me up. And having had plenty of time, I guess, between that incident and the first, I had remembered that I don't have to take experiences like that. I don't have to be subject to that behavior. So I just pushed him off of me. And I told him he was a and he got off on his floor, and I closed the elevator doors again and went up to my room, and I let that be that. I went to bed, and the next day I went about my job. I didn't have to associate with him anymore. And my command climate at the time, I guess being a female in your early 20s, kind of discovering who you are and how you're going to move through the world, I think that my command team made some assumptions about me based on the places I like to go, or the fact that I like to have a drink, or that I like to go dancing, that I was somehow asking for this to happen to me. The insinuation was that I'm a party girl and this is what happens to party girls. And then the last two incidences were, I guess, are considered harassment, and I think that it's important for me to share each of these because it's not everyone has experienced a violent rape. Not everyone has experienced an assault, but none of this behavior is to be tolerated or is okay. So the last two incidences are from relationships that I had with other soldiers, consensual relationships, and once we decided to terminate those relationships on the basis of this isn't going to work with us, being in such close proximity to one another, we work together, like this is not a good fit. Those soldiers then took the intimate details of our relationship and shared it with the rest of my unit, with my command team, with people who are supposed to rate me on my professionalism. These people are looking at me now like I can't, I'm not reliable, I can't be trusted, I must be sleeping with my whole unit. How can I possibly be value added at this point? And it made it very difficult for me to continue working in that environment, and ultimately I just cut as many ties with my unit as possible. If I didn't have to talk to them, I wouldn't talk to them. I addressed it with another member of my unit and asked, why is this happening? And the comments were, well, you should have known better. This is what you asked for. You have to expect this.
So did that spill into the way that you were treated by others? Did it change the way leaders, fellow soldiers, even subordinates, the way they started acting around you or started talking to you or treating you?
I believe it did. From my perspective, it seemed like I was no longer a professional. I was looked at as the infection in the unit. Like I was the bad apple. Everyone else could be perfectly productive, could meet deadlines, could execute mission like they're supposed to, but I was a distraction and I was a problem. Even in a place like Kuwait, which is said to be this cushy deployment, you're still separated from your support system. You're still in the desert for a year and pulled away from what your normal is. And so to be further removed from people I knew and I thought were on my team, it was very disheartening.
One of the most permeating problems with assault and harassment is that it's not compartmentalized. And I think almost every crime, that anytime you're a victim or survivor of a crime, nothing stays inside a box, right? It spills into other areas. It impacts other areas, whether it's your thinking, your trust of people, your relationships. In what ways did any of these violations and crimes that you suffered, how did it impact you in other areas?
I've talked at length about this with my behavioral health counselor. I think that I lost a lot of trust in myself. I think that I didn't feel like I could take care of myself anymore. It felt like I had blown up a balloon to the point where it was about to explode, and I was just waiting for it to pop. There were days that I would go to work and it would feel like a beehive. Like, my insides were just a beehive buzzing the whole time. I was always anxious. It I didn't know how to interact with the people that I worked with anymore. And that made me probably very short and not very warm. I also think that I tried to overcompensate by pursuing relationships that I knew would not be healthy for me. And I pursued activities that were not going to be productive for me in my personal life or in my career. I guess my way of dealing with it was mostly, I think, to party harder. And if I'm the one choosing it, then nobody can force it on me. That was not healthy for me. I think that, and I probably pushed that portrayal of myself. I pushed that picture of myself a lot. And so I think other people saw me that way. I felt like if they saw me that way, then I wouldn't look weak or I wouldn't be vulnerable, which really produced some very shallow friendships and didn't allow me to build a good support system in my personal life or in my career.
So what are some of the things that have helped, especially recently or over the years, that have helped you in dealing with the trauma?
I have a very best friend, and this was a female soldier who did come to me, and she just called me on my bull. If she told me, you can do what you want to do. It is your life. You can lead it however you please, and there are going to be consequences regardless of what it is you are choosing. But if you don't like this person that they're saying you are, distance yourself from those people and then build the person that you want to be. Allow your true self to be the priority. Stop putting on for other people as a way to somehow stay in control. Having a support system long term was very helpful. She introduced me to my husband, who's also been super supportive. It was important for me to share these details with him prior to us getting married, and he's always been very much about be healthy, take care of yourself, show yourself compassion and grace, and the things that happen to you don't have to define you.
What about recently? We talked about that. I wanted to make sure that we were doing this at your pace, right? I wanted to make sure that you felt safe, that if we talked about this, all that trauma or angst or suffering wasn't going to debilitate you in any way. So what have you been doing lately to feel comfortable enough to speak with someone like me about this?
I started seeing a behavioral health counselor, which I suggest for everyone for any and all reasons. It's nice to have someone that you can go and kind of offload things to, who is an objective third party. We worked through each incident. We also worked through how to handle these things. How can my experiences be used to benefit others in the future? And being a person of faith, I don't think that God has bad things happen to you, but I think that He allows you to use your experiences to benefit others, and that's mostly what I've worked through. If I can do the suffering now and allow someone else the opportunity or the empowerment to call out their perpetrator and report it and get themselves resources and remember that they are not a problem. They are someone a problem happened to, and that's not okay. Having that conversation about being of service to others was really helpful for me, and I think that that's probably what has me most comfortable. I'd like to think that if at 18 years old, if I had heard somebody else give their story, maybe I would have felt better about reporting my own experience. And so I hope that that's what this can be for somebody else.
Did you report any of the attacks or incidents that you experienced?
I did not until recently, which maybe that's important to share. Part of the, I guess one of the stipulations to being a part of this project was that I should seek some input from a SARC.
Mm-hmm.
And so I reached out to the 63rd RD SARC, Miss Jacqueline Hammer. She asked me if I were going to report, did I want it to be restricted or unrestricted, meaning restricted where I could receive medical care, they could do a rape kit or anything like that, or unrestricted where I would be pursuing UCMJ action against my attacker. And I decided on a restricted report. I felt like that was the best thing for me to do. That was going to be the most healthy thing for me to do, was to make sure I had the resources that I needed to move forward in life, and not allow those instances to be stumbling blocks anymore. So, 9 years after the first attack, 5 years after the last incident, I decided to talk to my SHARP representative.
This is a human story. You are a human being. You're a woman, and stats and figures don't tell the picture of your life. But I wanted to get a sense of how many times or how often events and attacks are thought to be underreported. And so I looked at the DoD reports from 2019, which actually had a graph that went back all the way to fiscal year 2012. Back in 2012, for example, only 11% of victims or survivors reported their cases. Fast forward in FY 2018, the number of reported cases was roughly 30%. So that's an improvement, but it's still a pretty ugly number to know that only 30% of the men and women who have been attacked, go out and report. Why is that? Why is it so difficult?
I think that admitting that you're not in control of yourself, of the things that happen to you, can make it very difficult to report. Having to sit across from an end of day meeting from the person who has shared intimate details about your relationship that you thought ended amicably with everyone else, naming you a whore or a slut or a tease, was probably the most frustrating and debilitating time of my life ever. You understand the climate of your unit. You can feel when certain behavior is tolerated. You know that, by the way that your peers and your NCOs and your officers react to certain comments or jokes or situations, how they might react to what you have to say, that might implicate, another one of your soldiers or someone in your leadership. And your word against theirs is a terrifying place to be. In my experience, I would rather put my head down, get out of that situation, and never have to deal with them again. But the problem with that is it's a small army.
What kind of fears played in your mind and your heart that made it more difficult to report? What were some of the paranoias, the worries that bubbled up anytime you thought, yes, I'm going to do it, no, maybe I shouldn't?
How would this jeopardize my growth in the career field and my growth in the Army as a whole? What kind of things were they going to tell their peers about the kind of soldier that I am? And, is this report going to negatively impact their view of me in a professional light? Am I going to be the female who ruined one of my male counterparts' careers because I reported?
Yeah.
And I think that is what held me back, for sure.
So if you were to be able to put your hands on the shoulders of your 18, 20-year-old self, that former PFC, that specialist, if you could go back in time and give her advice, what would you say?
I tell her that it's okay to not be strong all the time, but reporting is not a lack of strength, and being a victim doesn't make you weak. I think that I would probably tell her to practice lots of grace and compassion for herself, not to blame herself for the actions of others, because you can't control other people. And I would encourage her to report, at least restrict it, at least go talk to someone, set yourself up with a counselor who can help you process all of these feelings, the sadness, the confusion, the anger. At times you're just boiling over with rage and you don't know what to do with it. Get some assistance, get some resources, so that you can build a plan, a healthy plan, a productive plan to move forward.
Related to that idea, that topic is, if you are assaulted, that is a crime. That's a crime that was committed against you. And therefore, you're the victim of that crime if you were assaulted. And the perpetrator is to blame. Do you think a lot of blame gets placed on the victim, survivor? And how does that usually look and what happens?
Yes, I think that a lot of blame is placed on the victim. I think that as much as we like to think that we have control over what everyone else does, we like to think that the victim has control over what their attacker does. And that's not how it happens, ever. And I think a lot of times when we hear these cases of someone reporting, we always try to justify the attacker's actions. I guess because we don't want to think that imperfect people make up the Army when they in fact do. We like to think that this organization is impenetrable, that we are, that light to be looked at. Like, this is what right looks like, and it's not always that way.
What would you hope listeners and people who hear your story, how would you hope your story impacts them, and how would you like to see this kind of continue?
I hope that victims know that they're not alone. We can look at the numbers and the statistics and we know we're not alone, but sharing your story with somebody, being able to draw likeness between the two stories and your circumstances and how you felt after the fact and how you decided to move forward can be a very powerful thing. And I think that we should be able to build a community with each other, supporting each other through the healing process. I hope that leaders pay closer attention to just what we would deem as inconsequential conversation between soldiers during a battle assembly. And I hope that all soldiers, regardless of rank or position, know that it's really their responsibility to call out bad behavior and address it up front. If you see it or you hear it, remind that person that that is not going to build a stronger army. It's not going to build a stronger team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I hope listeners have heard from you is first of all, your courage. You know, you said 9 years have gone by since your first attack. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and then so this takes time. Healing takes time. It's okay if you are not comfortable. It's okay if you're not ready to share your story right now. But for anybody who's hearing this, first of all, if you are a survivor, if you've been attacked, I hope that you truly seek and find your healing. If you're someone who was like me, naive, completely oblivious to the fact that this is happening in our army, I want you to know that this is a problem. We have a problem in our military. We have a problem in the Army. We have a problem in the Army Reserve. And if we pretend like we don't, it'll never get better. Right now, as far as we know, only 30% of men and women who have been assaulted or harassed have said anything to anyone. That means they don't feel safe. That means that 70% of the soldiers out there don't feel safe. And that means that you, if you're in a leadership position, aren't doing what it takes to safeguard them and protect them. So if you're listening to this and you've never experienced firsthand the shame, the pain, the suffering of being harassed or violated sexually, be aware of the fact that you may have soldiers within your squad, within your sphere of influence, who are not okay and need help, or are seeking help, or may be okay now, but they've gone through a long journey of pain, recovery, and healing, and you might not be aware of the fact that your actions, your behaviors, your leadership style could be either detrimental or healing in their process. So take time to listen, take time to talk. It doesn't have to be on camera. It doesn't have to be recorded and shared for the world. But I hope that this conversation, this honest conversation, which is, I benefit from it, I hope the rest of you benefit as well. So thank you. And Sergeant Forster, thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for being brave. I have a tremendous amount of respect for you. I did even before we talked today. I think you're a great NCO, and continue to impact, train, and empower soldiers within your sphere of influence, within your squad, to be bold, brave, and live out the Army values. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time today to listen to our honest conversation, even though we understand that it may have been difficult for you to listen to. We hope that this was valuable to you, whether you're a leader or someone seeking help. Just remember that this is my squad and this is your squad. It is our responsibility to take care of each other. At the end of this video, we'll make some resources available for you to research and seek help. Thanks again.